We have a trip coming up, and it's the second time for us out of the country, and we've been doing a lot of preparations. As I was going through my list of things that have to be done and the things that need to be done, it really occurred to me that the process we go through in planning a trip, it's actually really helpful in making sure that everything goes well and that we get everything done that needs to be done. It's primarily due to my wife and how well she does making sure everything is accounted for. So I've learned a lot from her over the years with planning for all kinds of events and trips, but trust me, I am not a planner by nature. When I was talking with some friends about the trip and describing some of the details that we have to account for in the days and even weeks before the trip actually happens, they will sometimes remark on how well we were prepared for this trip. Sometimes accompanied with the statement saying, I would have never thought of doing that, or I wish I had known you could do that before our last trip. It would have been so much easier. So being a good content creator, I said to myself, that would be a great topic to do a video on. So this video. Like I mentioned, we're preparing to go on a trip to Scotland, traveling outside of the US for the second time ever. And when we planned our first trip, we did a lot of research. We watched a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of content, figuring out everything we needed to be aware of and to make sure we took care of before we took our trip. We learned a lot from that experience, and this time around, we have a much better plan in place. One aspect you may not have considered is how long it takes to get a passport. When we went to Scotland for the first time, it was just after travel restrictions had been lifted in most countries that had been in place during the COVID incident. We had planned to take our trip in September, and when we started the process to get our passports, we had about 9 to 10 weeks to get them turned around. And at that time, when we went to go find out how long it was going to take, the current processing time was estimated to be 9 to 11 weeks. That wasn't going to work if we didn't get them back in time. So we elected to pay at that time for what's called expedited processing, which costs an additional $60, but it cut that time down to 6 to 7 weeks to make sure we got them in time. I was still a bit nervous they wouldn't get here in time, but they did. We didn't have any issues. However, at the time that I'm recording this video, the processing times were much better. Currently, normal processing is taking about 4 to 6 weeks, and expedited processing takes only about 2 to 3 weeks. But keep in mind that mailing times are not included in that time estimate. They say on the website that it may take 2 weeks for your application to get to them, and then 2 weeks for it to get back to you. So keep that in mind. Ours didn't take that long to actually mail. So plan accordingly for that. We made an appointment actually at our local office, and we took our documents in, and we were able to get going right away. One thing I should mention that surprised us is that you have to bring an original of your birth certificate, and you have to leave the original with them, and they will send it back to you later. I'd say with your passport, but when they sent them to us, they actually sent them separately, and it wasn't by registered mail. It was just a basic envelope. So just something for you to be aware of, but it does have to be the original. As for the cost, at the time of this video, it costs $130 for the standard passport book, and expedited fees were additional $60. You can also get a passport card, but that's really only for use for return to the US by land or sea from Canada, Mexico, Bermuda, and the Caribbean. So in our case, where we were going to Europe, we personally just went with the standard passport book. All information can be found on travel.state.gov that has all that details if you want to read more about it. One thing I should also mention is that not all countries will stamp your passport anymore. From what I understand, most really don't do that anymore. We were really excited that when we finally arrived in Scotland that we wanted to get our passports stamped. And it turns out that when we arrived in Scotland, they don't do it anymore. So that was a little disappointing. Our first trip out of the country and hoping to have that, and it didn't happen. So. Most of the common cell phone carriers will provide you options for international travel with your cell phone plan. For example, we're with T-Mobile, and I can purchase 30 days of international calling, data, and texting for only $50. You can also do 10 days for $35, but the last time when we went, I had to actually buy it twice to cover our whole trip. So this time, I'm going to do it as the 30-day option because our trip is more than 10 days. And as long as you have a fairly recent cell phone, it should work overseas without any issues. We had great coverage the entire time we were in Scotland for our whole trip. And we actually went way off the normal path that people usually go to, and it still worked just fine. Just go to your carrier's website, search for international plans, and it should be fairly easy to set up. On T-Mobile, it's listed under the add-ons that you can do on your account. One thing I should mention that might be something you should consider is that there are some apps that you can use to download offline maps for where you're traveling. Apple Maps and Google Maps both allow you to download maps of areas you're traveling to, but I found that this other app worked way better for me because it allowed me to download a full offline map for the entire country of Scotland. And the app it's called Maps.me. With Maps.me and my downloaded map, I could still view a map of the entire area I was traveling across even without internet access. And I mainly had it available as a backup in case I ended up anywhere that I lost a connection and needed to find my way out of it, but we never had to use it on the last trip, but I did have it just in case. I just updated the map for Scotland just now for this next trip. And I should also mention that it's free and they do have an upgrade option, but it's not necessary to use the maps for offline mode. If you live in the US, you can also request to have your post office hold your mail for you for a period of time. This is really handy so you don't have to have an overflowing mailbox when you get back or have your neighbors try and grab the mail. Just go to the USPS.com website, log into your account or create one if you don't already have one, and under the Receive menu you should find the option for Hold Mail. You can schedule up to 30 days of mail to be held, and afterwards they'll deliver it to your house the following day when you return. It's a great option. One important item to do before traveling also is, especially when you're going international, is to notify your bank and or credit cards that you're going to be traveling. Your bank could potentially decline transactions that are legitimate if you don't let them know ahead of time. On my bank's website, you can fill out a really simple form that tells them what countries you're going to and the time frame, so that you're always prepared for that. And since we're talking about money, I have another item we learned about with our last trip. Most places will accept Visa or MasterCard easily. You can use it just about anywhere, but one tip we got from YouTube was that you should avoid using the money exchange locations in the actual airport. The currency exchange rates at the airport are not in your favor. For most transactions, the ideal option is let your bank handle the currency exchange for you automatically. Just run your card like you would at home, and you should be just fine. However, some places, when you run your card through the terminal, a question will pop up asking if you want the merchant to handle the currency exchange for you. Politely decline that option, let your bank handle it, and again, the same applies. Let the merchant system do the exchange for you isn't in your favor, just like it isn't at the airport. But one thing you might need to do is get some cash right away for some simple things like parking, taxis, and things like that. Find an ATM, ideally at an actual bank, and use that instead, and just withdraw the local currency in the amount that you need, and again, let your bank handle the currency exchange. Decline the option to let the ATM make the currency exchange for you if asked. When we first arrived in Scotland, we needed cash to feed a parking meter. We found a bank just around the corner from where we were and withdrew cash from the ATM, and then I had to go to a local shop and buy something small so that I could get some change back to feed the parking meter. We could have used our card at some of the parking meters, but this particular meter wanted us to use an app instead. So I tried to download the app, I tried to set it all up, but it didn't like me having a US phone number for confirmation, so it ended up being just easier to use cash. Travel insurance. One of those wonderful things that seems to be unnecessary but is highly recommended. I don't know all the ins and outs about travel insurance, but what I can tell you is that what we did is we purchased it for both of our trips. The main reason we did so is in case there are any unexpected travel interruptions. We actually went with a company called insuremytrip.com and got a package to cover everything in case of interruptions. It ended up costing around $250 to cover our entire trip. So it's not super expensive, but if it does come to a situation where you need to cancel the trip for any reason, it protects you and helps you recover most of what you were going to be spending on that trip. Drones. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, as it's something I enjoy doing, and you'll see if you want to watch my videos when we come back, I'll have a lot of drone footage in my video from our trip to Scotland this time. But when you're getting ready to go to a country, I highly recommend you check the laws in the country where you're traveling. You might need to register you and or your drone, and there are things you might not have known about traveling with drones that are important to know ahead of time as well. In the situation with Scotland, they are a UK country, and the UK has its own laws for covering drones. And what I had to do in this situation is I had to register with the UK's flight controls and get issued a piece of paper that I keep in my bag. And then I also had to register my drone itself and print out a label that I took and put on the top of my drone, that if it gets lost or it gets in an area, people can pick up the drone and they can look and find your phone number and the registration number on the drone and be able to get it back to you. One other thing you should know, people often ask, is what about taking the drone on the plane? This is perfectly fine. In fact, it's recommended. What I did is I carried on a backpack had most of my camera equipment and my laptop and the things I needed on the plane. But I also carried on as a personal item my drone bag. And in my drone bag, I had all my paperwork and I had all my equipment. But the important thing you need to know is that the batteries for your drone bag need to be in with you in the cabin. You do not check your batteries in for the flight. That's really important. That's the big piece that you need to know, is carry your batteries with you. So I recommend that you take it with you on the plane as a carry-on, and I had no problems going through any customs or any of the checkpoints or security. It was great. I had no problems coming right in. They didn't even look at it. It scanned it, went right through, and I was through security without any issues at all. So check the country you're going to see what their laws are, because their laws may be a little bit different. But for UK and Scotland, it's really simple to bring it and to use it, and it's been fantastic. Airport. Let's talk airport access. One thing with airport access that is helpful to get through security so much faster, there are multiple programs that you've probably heard about. One of them is the TSA PreCheck. Clear is another program. Global Entry. We didn't know anything about any of these programs when we first went on a trip to Scotland. So I did a deep dive and found out quite a bit about these programs. For those in the US, TSA PreCheck is primarily domestic. It's going to be when you're traveling from US city to US city, you'll use TSA PreCheck. What all these programs do is they have various levels of checks that they do on you as an individual before you fly, so that when you go through security, you're known as you're referred to as a known traveler. Depending on which program you choose will depend on how far and how much you're allowed to do. So that, like I said, TSA PreCheck is for USA only. To go to Europe, it is ideal to go with Global Entry instead. Global Entry actually includes TSA PreCheck as part of it. It costs a little bit more, and you have to do an interview with the government officials at the borders before you can actually be finally approved to use it. There's a little bit more checks that go through it. TSA PreCheck's a lot easier to get. The thing I would warn you about is that if you are going to do Global Entry and want to use it on this trip that you're going to, like we wanted to do on our last trip, you have to get your interview done prior to using it if you want to use it. The other option is you can get your interview done on your way back into the country, but you won't have access to any of the benefits of Global Entry until you get that all done. So essentially, we had spent the money to get Global Entry and realized we weren't going to be able to use it unless we did our interview prior to going. So we actually had to go to an interview location, which there are only about 30 of them around the country, and they're usually at international airports or border crossings. You have to go to those locations, get that interview done, and get that finished before you're able to use that. So just be aware of it. I highly recommend you look into it prior to going through the process, just so you know what you're going through, because we ended up having to make a overnight trip to the border in southern Texas in order for us to get ours approved and move forward. It was worth it for us because we wanted to be able to use the thing we paid for, because we didn't know at that time if we were going to be able to travel again outside the country anytime soon. So we wanted to make sure we utilized it if we paid the money. One thing also I should note is that many of those credit card companies will actually cover the cost of global entry for you if you use their card to pay for it. And our situation, our credit card company 100% covered it once it showed up through the global entry, through the Visa card. So great way to do it. It's highly worth it. When we came back through, we were going through Toronto, when we came back through the airport, we did have to go through one security line, but when we got to the second security line, because we had our global entry, we skipped that one. It took us maybe 5 minutes to get through that line where there was clearly a line. It was taking 15 minutes to 30 minutes for people to get through that other line. So highly recommend doing one of these options. The one we chose is global entry, mainly because our credit card company reimbursed us for it. So it's a great option. Okay, security tip. Something I learned recently, a lot of the airports are starting to implement facial scanners at TSA. And one thing they don't tell you when you're going to the facial scanner is that it's an optional process for IDing you. And there's a lot of controversy around it, but I found out that basically you can decline the face scanners at TSA. It is totally optional, and you can be very polite about it and say, no, thank you, I'd rather not do that. And they will then choose to identify you via your license, your passport, or any other documentation. They have alternative options for IDing you, and they don't have to do the face scanners. Many people have noted that who have declined this at the airport, people before them, none of them declined it, but then once they declined it, most of the people behind them declined it because it just makes you uncomfortable. It's something I'm not real sure I trust. Yes, there's cameras all over throughout the airport, but the intent of this is to ID you with facial recognition, and I'm just not sure I am okay with that at this point. So feel free to decline it. It is an optional feature, and if you look at the TSA's website, they will tell you in there it is optional, it's not required, but they have alternative options to ID you from that. Another travel tip that we're finding out is to be aware of how changes happen at the airport you're going through in case you have a layover, in case you have to change planes. So for example, we're flying through Heathrow in London, and we have an hour-and-a-half layover. The international flights that are incoming arrive at Terminal 5, but our outbound domestic flight, which goes to Glasgow, is at Terminal 3. Okay, so you have to change terminals. Well, I did some research and found out that you actually have to follow the signs to a bus that transports you over to the correct terminal. And if you do it correctly, you probably won't have to go back through security and customs. So, highly recommended to understand what the airport is structure-wise and what you have to do as you go through to avoid having to go back through security or possibly miss a plane. So, get a map. There's maps available online for every airport in the world, pretty much. And you can look at the airport and figure out information like that. I did look up on Reddit. I did a search for traveling, doing international travel, changing planes in Heathrow, and there were a lot of people that talked about that process of coming in as an international passenger, having to take that bus over, and it takes about 30 minutes if everything's flowing well for you to get over to your next gate. So hopefully we have plenty of time. There's no issues in there, but at least I'm aware of the process and I'm not walking in completely blind. AirTags. Luggage tracking. There are a bunch of different types of devices very similar to that. We're using AirTags on our trips. We got them for the last trip. I'm using them again now. Did change all the batteries just recently to make sure they are all fully charged up, ready to go. But the one nice thing about them is you can hide these in your luggage or attach them to your luggage, and you can pull up the app, the Find My app on your phone, and you can find where that bag is at any time during your trip. Also, you can set it up to notify you that you've left a bag behind in case you accidentally leave it behind in the restroom or in your car or whatever. It's a great tool for keeping track of your devices. I have one in my drone bag, I have one in my backpack, and I have one in my suitcase, so that if any of those get left behind or misplaced or stolen or lost by the airline, I know how to go find them. So one of the really cool things is that Apple just recently added a new feature to AirTags. And this allows you to share a link with the airline to track your lost device. So what you do is in the app that on that specific device, you can now generate a link that you can share with the airline to help them find the lost luggage. And once that item is actually returned to you, it automatically removes the temporary link's access to tracking your devices. Fantastic feature they've added recently. So Apple Tags, you can get a 4-pack for $80 and it'll cover most of your devices. They're fairly inexpensive, especially when you use them for multiple trips. Speaking of power chargers, not really, but we'll throw that in here anyways. Power chargers for international travel. These are a necessity. We actually took 3 different devices with us on our last trip. We have 2 small plug units that you can plug into the wall that has sliders on the side that pulls out the right power connectors for the country that you're in. And it's real handy because it has multiple USB ports on it and a plug on it for the front so that you can plug in your laptop and then plug your phones into it and all plug into a single jack. I also brought a separate power strip that had USB ports. It has a fan on it to keep it cool because it can get really hot with all the devices plugged into it. It's got USB ports. It's really convenient to plug in, and that helped out when we had multiple devices to plug into a single outlet. And then this year I bought another small power strip, again, that had access with USB-C ports on it, more USB-C ports because we have more devices now that use USB-C. I've got a new iPad and I've got all my camera gear. Most of my camera gear now uses USB-C plugs and my drone. So I kind of had to change that over because of all the devices that are changing. So keep those things in mind, but it's very handy to have to look ahead of the country you're going to, what kind of plugs you're going to be expected to use there. And then they make these great travel chargers that allow you to convert those really simply. So highly recommended. And one of our last topics is car rentals. So when we're going to Scotland, it's in the UK, which means that the steering wheel is on the opposite side of the car and they drive on the opposite side of the road than we do in the US. So because you're going to be focusing on these different aspects of driving, we were given the advice to request an automatic transmission car from your rental agency. By default, most cars when you rent in the UK will be manual transmissions. Many of the videos we watched about driving in the UK suggested that you should just take that whole act of driving a manual along with all the other things that you're going to have to deal with when driving out of the picture. That way you can just focus on driving and not the shifting. So that is something to keep in mind. Most cars in the UK are manuals. So that's one thing that I would highly recommend. It made our driving process a lot easier for us the last trip. It did take us about 30 minutes or so for us to kind of get used to driving in the UK. But once we kind of got the feel for it, it seemed to be fairly natural. I wouldn't be concerned about the process. It's actually a lot easier than you realize. Oh, I forgot one item I wanted to include on the list, and so this is after the fact, but prescriptions. Make sure that you have your prescriptions and check them. Make sure that you have enough to get you through your entire trip. And I would recommend you probably add another week to your vacation or whatever travel you're doing, just in case that you end up staying longer than you expected, or there's some delays in you getting back and you still have enough medication to get you through, say a week after you're supposed to be back. Also, we learned that it's better to keep your medications in the original bottles that has your information on the outside of the bottle. This makes it easier to pass through security, so they'll be able to identify these are issued to you and what type of medications they are, instead of having them in, say, a whole bunch of pills in a little baggie. That's a lot more difficult to get through security. So just one little tip to help you get through security fairly easily and not have any issues with your prescriptions. So this covers a few of those extra items that you might not have thought about when you were planning for a trip, especially one internationally. Of course, there's tons more you can talk about, like what should I pack? How can I find the best flights? Which airport to go through? And loads more, but this should cover some of the few items I thought you may not think about until the last moment or when it was too late. I would highly recommend that you and your family create a shared document that everybody can be involved in who's helping to plan the trip, and add a list of things to do before you leave. What we did is created a OneNote document, and we set up for this trip, and we created pages to keep track of every aspect of the planning. Accommodations, sights to see, things to do before we leave, and other relevant information for that trip. And it's been a great resource for us. So I'll wrap it up here. I hope you're going to have a great trip for wherever you plan on going. So be sure also to subscribe to the channel so that you can get notified when I start posting videos from our trip in Scotland. I'm looking forward to going, and I can't wait to share it with you here. So take care and have a great trip and have safe travel.